I'm 32 now, and Halloween just doesn't have the same magic it used to. These days, I mostly put up a few decorations, hand out candy, and spend the evening watching movies. That year, 2022, I decided to do exactly that. I spent the morning cleaning up my place, and later ran to the store to grab a few bags of candy for the trick-or-treaters I expected that night. By around 3 in the afternoon, I was home, with a movie playing, and the front door left slightly cracked open so I could hear if anyone approached. My neighborhood isn't particularly large, so I never get huge crowds of kids, but this year felt strangely empty. 2 full hours went by, and not a single knock, no laughter, no kids running between houses. When I looked out the window, the whole street was silent, no decorations lit, no parents walking with flashlights, nothing. It felt off, but I figured maybe fewer people were celebrating this year. Still, I stayed ready, hoping I'd get at least a few visitors. It wasn't until about 6:30 that my doorbell finally rang. Relieved, I grabbed the candy bowl and walked toward the door. But when I got close, I froze. Someone was standing there, leaning forward slightly, staring into my house through the cracked door. The costume they wore was simple but unnerving, a white mask that covered their entire face except for the eyes. Trying to play it off as normal, I opened the door and held out the bowl, telling them to take a handful. As they reached for the candy, I realized they were alone. There were no parents, no friends, just this one person. And up close, something felt wrong. They were too tall to be a kid, and through the eye holes of the mask, I could see dark tired circles and bloodshot whites. Whoever was behind that mask wasn't a child. Still, I didn't want to make things awkward. Maybe it was just an older teen being weird. They took some candy, turned, and walked off into the quiet street. I shut the door and sat back down to watch my movie, trying to shake off the unease. About 15 minutes later, I heard something. Faint footsteps just outside my front door. Expecting another trick-or-treater, I got up, but when I turned around, my heart nearly stopped. Standing inside my house, by the front door, was the same person in the white mask. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The silence was suffocating. Then, without a word, he slowly backed out of the door and left. I stood frozen for several seconds before rushing over and locking it. Through the window, I saw him walking down my driveway, glancing back at me several times before disappearing into the dark. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't some awkward teenager. This was a grown man, and he had just walked into my home like it was nothing. My chest tightened with panic. I grabbed my phone and started dialing the police. That's when I heard footsteps again. But this time, there was no knock, no doorbell, just slow, deliberate steps. I crept toward the door and looked through the peephole. A man was standing there, no mask now, just an average-looking guy in his 40s, wearing a brown long-sleeve shirt and jeans. He called out, "Hello? I'm looking for my kid. Have you seen them?" Something about his tone made my skin crawl. He looked around, pretending to search the yard, but then leaned closer to the door. And that's when I saw them. The same dark circles, the same bloodshot eyes. My stomach dropped. It was him. I backed away immediately, whispering to the police dispatcher that someone was trying to get into my house. I hid in the other room until I couldn't hear him anymore. When I finally returned to the front door, the man was gone. A few minutes later, the police arrived. After explaining everything, they searched the property. What they found made my blood run cold. A white mask, and part of a costume stuffed hastily into a bush beside my house. He must have ditched it to pretend he was someone else. Unfortunately, they never found him. The man had vanished into the night, but knowing he'd shown up 3 times, first pretending to be a trick-or-treater, then silently entering my house, and finally posing as a concerned parent, it was clear he had something sinister in mind. Even now, every Halloween, I can't help but keep all my doors locked and my porch light off. I'll never forget the feeling of looking into those red, tired eyes and realizing that the mask wasn't the scariest part. It was what was hiding behind it. It was Halloween night, and I was in 8th grade. My friends and I had finally decided we were too old to go trick-or-treating. For the first time in 10 years, we had no plans. Most of my group stayed home to hand out candy or watch movies, but my best friend Tyler and I wanted to do something, anything. When I got to his house, Tyler mentioned a place he'd heard of, an abandoned tunnel or old mine somewhere in the woods a few miles south of town. Neither of us really knew what it was, but he had directions from a friend. That was all we needed. We grabbed a flashlight, hopped on our bikes, and rode through the cool October night. The farther we got, the fewer people we saw. The last porch light disappeared behind us, and soon we were at the edge of the woods. We locked our bikes to a tree and found the narrow path Tyler's friend had described. It wasn't a real trail, muddy, overgrown, and winding. Tyler led with the flashlight while I followed close behind, trying not to lose my footing. Every few minutes we had to stop and figure out where the path even was. After about 40 minutes, the trees opened into a small clearing. At the far end, built into a hill, was a dark hole. That had to be it. The entrance was barely wide enough for a person to crouch through, and beyond it was nothing but black. Tyler shined the light inside, revealing jagged stone walls coated in dust. It looked endless. Before we went in, I glanced behind us toward the woods. For an instant, I thought I saw something move between the trees. Just a shadow, quick and silent. My stomach tightened. I told Tyler to shine the light that way, but when he did, there was nothing. Maybe I was just scaring myself. We stepped inside. The air was cold and stale, and our footsteps echoed like we were walking through a cave. Dust drifted through the flashlight beam, and every sound seemed to travel forever. We'd only gone a short distance when both of us froze. Somewhere ahead, faint but clear, came the sound of whispering. It wasn't loud, just quiet voices that echoed off the walls. We stared into the darkness, trying to see something, but the beam of light barely reached beyond us. The whispering continued, soft and steady. Without saying a word, we turned and started back toward the entrance. As we moved faster, the whispers grew louder. Whether the voices were getting closer or just echoing differently, I didn't want to know. My pulse was pounding as the darkness seemed to chase us. We finally reached the mouth of the tunnel and stopped dead. Standing about 30 feet away in the clearing was a man. He wasn't in a costume, no flashlight, no candy bucket. Just an ordinary-looking man, slowly walking toward the tunnel. Tyler didn't say anything. He just ran. I followed instantly. We sprinted through the woods, branches slapping our faces, hearts hammering. We didn't look back until we were nearly out of breath. The clearing was long gone behind us. When we finally slowed down, we tried to process what had happened. Who was that man, and what about the voices we heard inside? The more we thought about it, the creepier it became. If that guy had reached the entrance just seconds earlier, he could have blocked us in completely. Maybe the whispers belonged to other people working with him, or maybe they were something else entirely. Either way, we were lucky. Had we stayed even a moment longer, we might have been trapped in that tunnel with whoever or whatever was waiting inside. We never went back, and every Halloween since, when the night grows quiet and the wind moves through the trees, I still think about those whispers and that man in the clearing, standing there, waiting for us to come just a little closer. It was late October, my sophomore year at university. I lived in a dorm with a girl named Kylie. She was outgoing, always surrounded by people, while I preferred quiet nights and my own space. Still, when Halloween weekend came around, she begged me to go with her to a party at a friend's house. At first, I said no. I wasn't really in the mood to drink and socialize. But after some convincing, I gave in. I threw together a cheap ghost costume from Spirit Halloween, and at 8 p.m., we ordered an Uber to her friend's place. The house was about 10 minutes from campus, but it felt like we'd driven into another world, quiet, isolated, sitting alone on a stretch of empty road. The place was decked out in orange lights and inflatable decorations. It looked festive, but somehow eerie, surrounded by so much darkness. Inside, it was smaller than I expected, just 15 or so people, all around our age. It wasn't bad, honestly. We played games, drank, laughed. For the first time in a while, I actually felt relaxed. By 1 a.m., though, I was done. My energy was gone, and I just wanted to sleep. I found Kylie, but she was too drunk to leave and said she'd crash there for the night. I didn't really know anyone else, and the thought of staying made me uncomfortable. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting me instantly. The Uber fare back to campus was $30, way too much for a 10-minute ride. I didn't even think I had that in my account. Maybe it was the alcohol clouding my judgment, but I figured a 10-minute car ride couldn't be more than a 40-minute walk. So, I decided to walk. The road was dark and mostly empty. Streetlights were spaced far apart, so I'd walk through long patches of darkness before another weak yellow glow appeared ahead. My phone flashlight barely helped. For a while it was quiet except for my footsteps on the pavement. Then I noticed a car behind me. At first I thought it was parked, but every time I looked back it seemed a little closer. I never heard it move. It just appeared further down the road each time. Eventually I couldn't see it anymore. Maybe it turned off somewhere, I thought. But then I heard it, the low hum of an engine behind me. I turned around and saw a car rolling through the fog, headlights off. My stomach dropped. It slowed down until it was right beside me. The window rolled down, and a man leaned over from the driver's seat. Patchy beard, pale skin, an odd smile. "Where you heading?" he asked. "It's late to be walking out here alone." "I'm okay," I said quickly, trying to keep walking. He matched my pace, the car creeping beside me. "I'll give you a lift," he called out. "You shouldn't be out here." Something about his tone changed. It wasn't friendly anymore. When I glanced over, the smile was gone. His face was hard, his eyes locked on me with a look that made my heart race. "I said I'm fine," I muttered, speeding up. That's when he slammed the brakes and swung his door open. He was getting out. I froze for half a second before I heard another sound, a distant pair of headlights cutting through the fog. Another car was coming down the road. The man hesitated, glancing toward it. I ran straight into the middle of the street, waving my arms like crazy. The oncoming car slowed down, its high beams flashing. The man scrambled back into his car and peeled off into the darkness, tires screeching on the asphalt. The car that stopped turned out to be one of the guys from the party, someone I barely recognized. I told him what happened, and he offered to drive me back to campus. The moment I got in, my hands were shaking. The adrenaline hit harder than any drink I'd had that night. I keep thinking about how lucky I was, that another car happened to be coming right then. If not, I might have disappeared into that fog without a trace. That thought still keeps me up sometimes.